We've got a list of busts for you today on Fantasy Football Today. It's actually a very big day here for us. We've got busts today, and then we've got breakouts tonight. If you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, you can see it live, youtube.com/Fantasy Football Today. We're going to have a bunch of shows beginning at 7 o'clock and ending sometime around 10. We won't be on the entire time, but if you subscribe to the channel, you'll get notified when the episodes get scheduled. Welcome, everybody. Let's talk about some players who are not going to meet ADP. On YouTube, our producer, Thomas Schaefer, says bust candidates to avoid. It says big busts, and he has DK Metcalf growling at us in the thumbnail. They don't get much bigger than DK Metcalf in terms of just like the size of his arms, and he could shred me to pieces.
I would guess if we were measuring busts amongst players who actually accrue fantasy points, he would be towards the top of the bust list.
Exactly what I'm saying, but also he terrifies me, so I'm just gonna be nice. But what is a bust? Is it a player who just completely stinks? Does he miss his ADP by like 2 rounds? Heath, what's a bust?
I mean, a bust encompasses all those things. A lot of the busts this year are going to be guys who get hurt and ruin fantasy seasons. And we're not trying to project injuries, so we didn't call anybody a bust for that. What I basically looked at was guys in the top first 6 rounds, because I think it's hard to call somebody a bust if they're being drafted in round 8 or round 9 or round 10. But the guys being drafted in the first 6 rounds who I am at least a round behind their ADP.
Okay. Dave Richard, any quick thoughts on that?
I mean, it's the same thing. Everybody knows what a bust is. A player that you want to avoid because he's not worth what you're going to have to draft in that.
I would like for him to not even be close. At least a round, right?
At least a round.
Like, I'm taking him 4 picks later.
I think there could be a subtle difference for early round picks.
Okay.
Players that are like, for example, you could make the case that Patrick Mahomes with an ADP of 10 to 15 is a bust. Based on that, I would still take him in round 2. I'm not going to say that he's a total bust in round 1. I just wouldn't take him in round 1.
And that was one of the kind of cheat codes that I think we've all used probably over the last few years. Just whatever QB is being drafted as QB1, that's 2 rounds ahead of where we thought they should go, because we said don't take one until the end of round 3, and so that was an easy bust. It's more difficult if Mahomes is going to go between 10 and 15 for me, because I've got Mahomes going like 19th. And I assume that these ADPs probably factor in some super flex or 2 quarterback drafts. Now, I will make this point really early because I texted it to you guys last night. Like, when we're looking at Fantasy Pros ADP and when we're talking about quarterbacks, all of these other sites account 4 points per pass touchdown. CBS standard scoring is 6 points per pass touchdown. I think Patrick Mahomes in early round 2 in a 4-point per pass touchdown league is a bust case, and pretty much all of the quarterbacks based on their ADP are, because the difference between quarterbacks, especially pocket passers, is not near as big if they only get 4 points for a pass touchdown.
CBS ADP right now: McCaffrey 1, Jefferson 2, Eckler 3, Patrick Mahomes 4.
Okay.
So we would say don't take Patrick Mahomes.
Do you think, though, that in the last 5 years, other than maybe 1 year, any of the people who drafted Patrick Mahomes in round 1 regretted it at the end of the year?
It's a great point. And if you have the 4th pick, you're probably not going to get Mahomes. I mean, he did go 24th in a draft we did last night, but it's a lot of CBS people in that draft. For the most part, Mahomes isn't making it till 20th. But still, so then why should we say no way should you take him 4th overall? Probably because you can take Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts in the 2nd round. And there's just
exactly. What are you passing up at 4th overall to take Patrick Mahomes?
You're not taking advantage of the depth of the position. That's
exactly.
Right, let's talk about the mutual busts. You guys both gave me a long list of busts. There were 4 of them that showed up on both of your bust lists. And 2 of them are Seahawks and 2 of them are tight ends: Ken Walker and DK Metcalf. Now, Dave was using half PPR ADP on Fantasy Pros. Heath was using full PPR, which is good. We can give you perspective on both. I'll just tell you this: if you toggle between half PPR and full PPR, you're going to see running backs going a lot earlier in half PPR. You're going to see wide receivers going earlier in full PPR. And Ken Walker is RB16 or RB17 on either format. He's 37th in half PPR overall. He's 47th overall in full PPR. And here are the players that he's going ahead of. In half PPR, Ken Walker is going ahead of Aaron Jones, Damian Pierce, and Miles Sanders. In full PPR, Ken Walker is going ahead of two of those three, Miles Sanders and Dameon Pierce, but not ahead of Aaron Jones. Let's call him a round 4 pick, early round 4 and half PPR, late round 4 and full PPR. Dave, he's a mutual bust. Ken Walker, we see in our consensus rankings, we have him as RB26, not RB16 or 17. So your thoughts?
We have been wringing our hands of Kenneth Walker since the NFL draft because of what the Seahawks have done. And there's been absolutely nothing this summer to make us think otherwise, that Kenneth Walker is going to shock us and be a league winner. He does have league winning upside in his profile. Okay. Fast running back, certainly somebody who can make big plays. We saw that last year. I just don't know how many opportunities he's going to get from game to game. He'll get more than a token few, but I think we're looking at a Seahawks offense that's going to throw the ball more than we've ever given them credit for. This is a team that on first and second downs, they've given their running back carries anywhere from 18 to 18 and a half carries per game on average. I think that number dwindles. I think the receptions dwindle specifically for Walker because Charbonnet was drafted to the team, because Smith-Njigba was drafted to the team. So it becomes a number crunch for him. I like him better in non-PPR because I think that he'll be able to at least get you, maybe 1,200 total yards. That's still pretty good, but I don't think he's going to get a ton of touchdowns. And it really caps his upside in full PPR because I don't even know if he's catching 20 passes this year. Great player, tough situation. I would take him in round 5 at the absolute earliest.
Yeah, I think we even have a little bit, at least, of question about the great player part. We know he's a great player in terms of making big plays, but that's pretty much all that he was great at last year. He was absolutely terrible in terms of receiving work, and not good in terms of the number of his carries that went for 1 yard or fewer. He was really, really good at making the big plays. And then the team went and drafted a second round running back that is better, profiles as being better than him in the two areas where he struggled last year.
Would you guys take all three of the? I know you take Aaron Jones over him. Would you take Miles Sanders and Dameon Pierce over him?
For sure.
By a lot.
Pierce, you expecting more catches? Who catches more passes, Pierce or Walker?
Pierce.
Dameon Pierce. Pierce might have more touchdowns too.
I would just like to that explosive run rate thing, and right. So he was this boomer bust running back, as Heath mentioned. He made a lot of big plays. He also had a lot of carries for 0 or negative yards. He was one of the worst in the NFL in that. But it's really an interesting stat because there are a lot of great running backs that are low in that metric. I could, like Dalvin Cook was. Let's see, who else?
Now, has Dalvin Cook been historically, or he was last year when his efficiency fell a little bit?
This is not the list that I am looking for. Jonathan Taylor has been on that list toward the bottom. Let's see. Okay. ETN, not much better than him. Alexander Madison, for what it's worth, didn't have a ton of carries. Was worse than Ken Walker here. DeAndre Swift, Nick Chubb, Jonathan Taylor, Tony Pollard. They were all, below average in that. They weren't as bad as Ken Walker, but Travis Etienne basically was.
I think Etienne and DeAndre Swift both makes that is like the Chubb one surprises me, and I'd be curious if that was a 1-year thing or if that's happened throughout his career, and that would give me some pause. But like the Etienne Swift Walker comparison as runners fits perfectly with the way I view those guys. The difference is that I think both Etienne and DeAndre Swift can do things in the passing game.
All right. Let's go to DK Metcalf then. And he's a round 3 pick. He's wide receiver 15 in half PPR and full PPR. And he's going ahead of Deebo Samuel, Calvin Ridley. He's going ahead of Joe Mixon, Aaron Jones. And in full PPR, he's going ahead of all of those players and also Jahmyr Gibbs, Lamar Jackson, and Joe Burrow. So when would you guys feel comfortable drafting DK Metcalf? Heath, you can start.
I would feel comfortable with him in the middle of round 5. I like him a little bit better as a wide receiver in non-PPR and half PPR than I do in full PPR, but he falls behind more running backs in that format. He is a borderline number 2 wide receiver. I think it's Jamie who always says there's actually 30 number 2 wide receivers. And so if we have a guy ranked 30th, doesn't mean that we don't think he's a number 2. I think Metcalf is a number 2. The problem is that he's not like, he's had basically one season where he outperformed this draft cost. He's been in a dead heat with Tyler Lockett in terms of fantasy production. And they just added a guy in JSN who might, and I think if everything goes as planned, will be a better target earner than DK Metcalf. I would expect an efficiency spike from him. I would expect that his red zone production bounces back, but I do think the targets fall off. And I think by the end of year, there's a risk that JSN's the number 1 wide receiver in this offense.
Oof. I have a hard time loving DK Metcalf even in round 4 when Tyler Lockett's outproduced him in PPR and non-PPR on a per game basis each of the last 2 years. And now they're adding Smith-Njigba into the mix. So you need a hyper efficient year from DK Metcalf for him to pay off. And could it happen? It would need to be like one of the most efficient years ever, because I agree with Heath. I think there's a target dip coming for sure for DK Metcalf. Where I don't agree with Heath is where to take him. I would still go a little bit earlier than the middle of round 5, but we're splitting hairs. I think he's going to be one of the most overdrafted and underproducing receivers in fantasy this year. He hasn't even gotten over 14 PPR points per game each of the last 2 years.
Yeah. He was playing through a foot injury and a Russell Wilson injury 2 years ago. I have made that excuse for him. He needed off-season surgery. Like I said,
what's the excuse for last year?
There is none. There is none.
And I don't know that he needs an excuse. Like, he's got 4 seasons in the NFL. 3 of those seasons, he averaged between 56 and 62 yards per game.
Okay, but I'm not really counting his rookie year because that's actually a good rookie year. He had a 900-yard rookie season. That's really good. His second year was outstanding. I don't want to just repeat everything I said last week. His second year was outstanding. That was great. His 4th year sucked. His 3rd year was interesting. His 3rd year, he got off to a great start. Then Russell Wilson got hurt. Then DK Metcalf got hurt and played through it. I could have made excuses for him. I can't make any excuses for him after last year. So look at the ADP. Sorry, look at the consensus rankings that we have on our YouTube channel right now. We have Hopkins, Jerry Jeudy, Christian Kirk, Drake London, DK Metcalf, and then Amari Cooper. Specifically with Kirk and London, you could have similar concerns about a new guy coming in for Jacksonville, Bijan coming in for Atlanta, and of course London doing everything without Kyle Pitts at the end of last season. So I have a hard time with that, with London and Kirk versus Metcalf. How do you rank those 3 guys?
London, Kirk, and Metcalf.
Mm-hmm.
I don't love any of the 3. I'm probably looking for all 3 of those guys in like round 5 or round 6, somewhere in that type of range. I'll take Metcalf at the top of that group, followed by London and Kirk.
And I think what you see when you look at this list, and I know the people listening can't see it, but you said Hopkins, Jeudy, Kirk, London, Metcalf, and then it's Cooper, McLaurin, Johnson, Godwin, Dotson. Like, we all have 5 of those guys ahead of DK Metcalf. It's just not the same 5 guys. And that's why, like, I'm the guy who has pushed Christian Kirk up ahead of DK Metcalf, but I've got Jerry Jeudy like 4 spots behind DK Metcalf. The reason that Metcalf belongs in that range is because they do have the similar concerns.
Yeah.
I think, like, we're all expecting Trevor Lawrence to throw 75 more passes than Geno this year. And I just think that Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk are probably going to be pretty close in targets, but I don't think there's a 3rd guy like Tyler Lockett or JSN, whichever one.
You have 5 of these guys ahead of Metcalf? You don't have.
Well, there's 4 in the consensus rankings.
Give us the names again. We should tell everybody.
Okay, Hopkins ahead of Metcalf.
Sure. In PPR. This is in PPR.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
PPR, I would rather have Hopkins.
Jeudy.
Rather have Jeudy in PPR.
Not you, Heath, though.
No.
Kirk.
I have Kirk ahead.
I do not. I've got Metcalf ahead.
Drake London.
I have London ahead.
I have Metcalf ahead.
Cooper.
Cooper's 1 spot ahead of DK for me.
I have Cooper behind.
McLaurin.
One spot behind DK.
I have McLaurin ahead of DK.
Wow. Okay. Deontay.
For sure, Deontay.
I'm out on Deontay.
All right. That's fine. Let's go to our tight ends on the mutual bust list. George Kittle and Darren Waller. Kittle is his ADP is really surprising to me.
Yes.
He is tight end 4. And he, of course, has been a top 3 tight end per game. I think it's 5 years in a row. But he's tight end 4. And he's in between TJ Hawkinson and then a group of 3 who have basically the same exact ADP. Darren Waller, Kyle Pitts, and Dallas Goedert. But yeah, okay, so let's make it. I think we've made our thoughts clear on Kittle, but make him again, I suppose. Where should he go, Dave? Where should he be among tight ends?
He's in that 3rd tier of tight ends, and still in my rankings, he's 6th among tight ends, but I wouldn't take him in round 5 or round 6, maybe in round 7. I would consider him. I don't like what happened last year when everybody was healthy and Purdy was under center and McCaffrey was there. Really, it was McCaffrey coming to San Francisco that started to hurt George Kittle when everybody was healthy. And then when Debo was out, Kittle's numbers went crazy, tons of touchdowns. That's what you have to hope for if you draft George Kittle, is that he scores a bunch of touchdowns. In his 5 games, this includes the playoff games, 2 of the playoff games, we're not counting the Philadelphia game where Brock Purdy got hurt. 5 games where everybody's healthy in the San Francisco offense. He averaged 4.2 targets per game, 10 PPR points per game, 3.4 catches per game. He had 2 touchdowns in those games. Both came against Arizona in week 18. I have to worry about him becoming a touchdown or bust tight end if he's going to continue to see only 4.2 targets per game.
Yeah.
And I don't know if anybody else is feeling this way, but I kind of have concerns about Brock Purdy turning back into a pumpkin. And I don't feel a whole lot better that the backup plan is Trey Lance and or Sam Darnold.
It's going to be Darnold.
You
saw the preseason game, then you know why.
Well, I've seen 5 years of Sam Darnold, so I don't know.
It's great.
I don't know for sure.
If Sam Darnold has beat you out for a backup quarterback job, then you know that you're in trouble. You know your future in the NFL is.
Yeah. Let's focus on Kittle and you guys.
Well, that's the point. Is that if he doesn't have a great quarterback, does that hurt him, or maybe does that help him, or is it something that we can just write off because there's so many other targets in the offense?
I think the only case for Kittle is that obviously he's great, but also we always project the 49ers at the start of the season as if everybody's going to be healthy, but they're not. I mean, they're McCaffrey and Debo. Kittle himself obviously is an injury risk. So I always struggle with that because I feel the same exact way about all of these guys, but there are definitely going to be times when someone's not on the field. So I don't really know how to. I'm not taking Kittle for the most part.
Well, and I think history suggests with 13 missed games in the last 3 years and Kittle turning 30 in October that he's probably the most likely of those guys to miss some time.
Yeah.
He hasn't played a full season since
right
2018.
Waller's right behind him.
No, he meant the 49ers guys. But
I thought you meant among tight ends.
No, let's go to Waller then. Why is he a bust, guys? He's got basically, like I said, the same ADP as Pitts and Goddard. They're all more or less tied for tight end 5, 6, 7. We're talking about round 5, 6, I guess. Yeah. All right, Dave. Why is Darren Waller on the bust list?
He's on the bust list because I think he's being drafted too soon. But I would take him ahead of George Kittle. I just wouldn't take him where ADP's taking him. He's 30 years old. He's missed at least 6 games each of the past 2 seasons. Last year, if you exclude week 5 when he had just 8 snaps, his pace in 2022 was terrible. It was 733 yards and 6 touchdowns. It's 9.4 PPR points per game if you include the 53 catches. You have to assume he'll miss some time because he's at that point in his career. I don't think he'll be wasted when he's healthy. I don't think that the Giants are going to ignore him. Daniel Jones is going to ignore him. And he's a differentiator in that offense when it comes to his size. And the film late last year actually wasn't bad for Darren Waller. He was still moving pretty well. I think the Giants are going to be a lot more like focused on spreading the ball around. They were there last year. I think they're going to do it again. Waller might be at the top of the pecking order. He might average 6.8 targets per game, and that's really good for a tight end. I just don't know if he's going to be as effective, and I think he's going to be the guy that defenses are going to take away when they get in the red zone. I think that's who they're going to choose to take away first and foremost on passing downs. So it makes me worried about just how many touchdowns he's going to get. And I'm worried about how much he's going to play this year. And I don't want to pay what the ADP says for Darren Waller.
So how would you guys rank Kittle, Waller, Pitts, Goddard?
Pitts is at the top of the list for me. I'll buy into his upside with a better quarterback. I think it's a better quarterback with Ritter than what he had last year, because he was getting open last year. He seems healthy now. Pitts is at the top of the list, then Waller, then Kittle, then Goddard. I would take none of these guys with a top 50 pick in PPR.
Yeah, I don't have any of them in the top 50. I've got Pitts round 5. I mean, it's basically 1 round difference between all of them. A slightly bigger difference between Kittle and Waller, but Pitts round 5, Goddard round 6, Kittle round 7, Waller round 8.
Okay.
Wow.
Let me ask you guys a more general tight end question. I keep finding myself more and more, I do these drafts not taking a tight end until pretty late. And that has nothing to do with Kelsey. I haven't been in the Kelsey zone, I guess. But like the picks 6 through 8, basically. But
there's a song for that.
What is the song?
I went to the Kelsey zone. And I think it's a nice range between 6th and 9th overall.
Very good, Dave. Thank you. I'm sure he would agree.
I need Heath's aviator sunglasses now to match the song.
Yeah, I was a little upset. I just kept doing these drafts and I never end up with one of these top 7 tight ends. And then I said, hey, listen, we got to remember great or late, right? There's a purpose to why we keep saying great or late. But I was thinking every league I'm in so far has been either 3 receivers and 1 flex or 2 receivers and 2 flexes. I think I'd be more likely to take one of these top 7 tight ends if it were 2 running backs, 2 receivers, and 1 flex. In other words, if we were getting rid of a starting receiver or a starting flex. Okay. You guys agree with that?
No, I don't know if I necessarily agree. No, I don't agree.
Maybe that's why they are pushed up in ADP, because more drafts are that way. Because I do think it's very likely that they would go earlier if you couldn't start as many running backs and wide receivers.
I think so.
But so maybe I'd be more okay with that. I think specifically with Waller, I think the injury concerns that Dave hit on are certainly worth monitoring. The age, he's a year and a month older than George Kittle. Like, he's going to turn 31 week 1, I think. So that's a little bit of a concern. And then it's not just like, I know I get harassed on Twitter because I say Daniel Jones is not a great passer, but like, there's been one player in the Daniel Jones era who's had more than 100 targets. Like this, he runs and he's great at it. He runs so much that there's just not as many pass attempts. And those pass attempts are not above average in terms of accuracy or efficiency. And so it's just like, even if Waller's the number 1 target earner on the team, I believe each of the last 2 years, the number 1 target earner has received 76 targets.
I won't get too far into this because Daniel Jones is on someone's bust list. We'll talk about that later. Only
not
thing
mine.
I disagree with, yeah, no,
that narrows it down.
I think we're going to see more. I think we're going to see more pass attempts. They're going to lose more games this year, and I think they want to be more pass heavy. And I'll give you some stats on that in a little bit.
We'll talk about his schedule then too.
Exactly. All right.
That's obviously Waller's schedule.
Draftathon is 2 weeks from today, our 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern time extravaganza, 4 to 10. It's a 6-hour show on youtube.com/fantasyfootball today. We're going to have amazing guests throughout the show. So join us for that. That's Draftathon. I'll tell you more about that as we get closer. Right now, though, what you need to do is go to tinyurl.com/FFT donate. We need to raise more money for St. Jude. So bid on some awesome things. Spots in our mock drafts, guest spots on this podcast, Zoom calls with our analysts. So many awesome things to be a part of, and not just Fantasy Football Today, but across all of our podcasts, basically. So yeah, we're all of this is going to St. Jude. So help us raise. We're going to hopefully crush $100,000 this year. Help us raise some money. Also want to say, not to take any attention away from St. Jude, one of the people in our my FFT Open division And we raised $22,000 for St. Jude with that. That was great. One of the guys in my division is from Maui. So I made a donation last night. He told me what he's going through, and he actually was a little bit lucky, but he's helping some people who really weren't. I made a donation last night. I just encourage everybody to do what you can to help out in that situation. We have a spot in the podcast league available at that URL, tinyurl.com/FFT donate. It's not the 14-team podcast league. It's what we're calling now the Leftovers League. It's 10 teams, super flex, half PPR. Heath and I share a team. We're going to crush you. Join the Leftovers League, raise money for St. Jude. And finally, speaking of Daniel Jones, very clever. Putting Daniel Jones in the subject line is not going to get your email read on the air. Already 2 people have done that this morning. It keeps happening. I appreciate the effort, but I'm not falling for it. We'll take a break. When we come back, an update on Breece Hall, Javonte Williams, and maybe Alexander Madison, and then more busts. We'll be right back. All right, news and notes. I'm going to give you guys 4 or 5 minutes on this because we have probably 25 more busts to get to for the second half of the show.
25?
We have so many names. So let's talk about Breece Hall. The Jets are confident he'll be ready for week 1, but all signs indicate, including what Robert Saleh said, they're going to be taking it very slowly with him. An ESPN report said that Dalvin Cook is expected to handle more of the work early in the season. So now, where are we? This keeps changing. Dave, where are we with when to draft Breece Hall, when to draft Dalvin Cook, who still is not with the team? He's expecting a child, and he's still recovering from shoulder surgery.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm the best person to ask because I've been on the Breece Hall roller coaster for the last 36 hours, and I still view him as somebody who can eventually be an absolute league winner. And when the news first came out, he was still on the PUP list. I sank him like a rock. I wanted Dalvin Cook. Then he came off the PUP list. I had him very high. I talked about it on the show yesterday that he was worthy of being in a top 40 pick. If he's not going to play as much in the first 4 weeks of the season, then that's going to hurt his overall numbers. That goes without saying, but maybe it makes him much, much more of a concern that he won't even be startable until Halloween. So I readjusted my projections on Breece Hall and I moved him down. And there was a point in the draft yesterday, I picked 51 overall. So that's, round 5 for sure. And I thought to myself, I can't wait to get Breece Hall with this pick. And it turned out that Breece Hall went in front of me. And I was actually upset until I got James Conner in round 6. And I was like, oh, well, I think I'd rather have James Conner. And so that was a light bulb moment for me that Breece Hall was ranked too high for me as a top 40 player. So I am now in the range of taking Breece Hall. He's in that round 5-6 range. I've got him 57th overall. Some people will still say it's way too high. I think it's fine. I moved Kamara ahead of him. I moved Alexander Madison ahead of him. We talked about Conner and moving him ahead. And now all that being said, I got a text this morning from somebody who I trust, who's around the Jets, and he's adamant that this is going to be Breece Hall's backfield once he's ready to go. So I'm back on the stinking roller coaster again with Breece Hall. I think he's going to end up being a round 5 pick, but I know he's coming back from an ACL, and I know running backs coming from an ACL are always tough to gauge. A lot of the times they don't do well. I don't know if I can help myself, but that's a me problem. Okay. Everybody watching, if you guys don't want to trust it, I get it. Don't take him. Leave him for guys like me. I think his value is so depressed that he's worth taking, certainly in round 5.
Yeah, it's a 6-7 turn thing for me. I love the talent, but we already have the ACL concerns. Yes, he's back at practice, but he's still not a full participant in practice. He's still not 100%. We know the history of the inefficiency of running backs in year 1 from the ACL, and now his team just gave $7 million to a guy who's been an all-pro running back or a Pro Bowl running back for 4 years. Maybe it could work out. I think the talent's there that it could work out. And maybe you get a final 5 or 6 games like J.K. Dobbins had last year. But what was J.K. Dobbins' season worth last year in terms of draft capital?
Oh, none.
Right.
Free agent pickup. He stunk, But he got re-injured. So and so did Chris Godwin, but that coming back from ACL, I don't know that we can say that that's going to happen.
I don't think we can say that it will happen at all. I do think we should view him as more likely to have that happen than a guy who is not coming off an ACL or not currently injured.
All right, so you say 6-7 turn. Dave says round 5, round 6. What about Dalvin Cook? Would you take Dalvin Cook ahead of, say, A.J. Dillon or Samaje Perine?
No.
But I moved him up.
He's not healthy either. He's not healthy either.
Maybe. I mean, like, obviously he had the shoulder surgery, but is he staying away from the team for a week because of the child? Or is he staying away from the team for a week because he's not healthy?
He also might not be that good. He's 28. His metrics have been declining.
Yes, that's true. But even a declining Dalvin Cook is better than the depth they had behind Breece Hall.
When did I say that it wasn't? Of course,
no, you didn't. Okay, but he can still be. Listen, I got to be fair. Dalvin can still be productive. I don't think he's going to turn back the clock to where he was, 2 or 3 years ago.
All right.
The other thing is that like right now it's individual drills for Breece Hall and that's it. You mentioned this yesterday, Adam. They've got a month before week 1. Breece Hall is going to get ramped up. And if he's looking good, maybe based on the text I got, maybe they won't hesitate to use him. And I know that I agree with Heath that the J.K. Dobbins comparison is fair. What if he's more like Tony Pollard from last year? And I don't know if this is fair to say because Pollard isn't coming back from an ACL, but Tony Pollard needed how many weeks? 2, 4, 6, 7 weeks to really break out. And then when he broke out, that dude broke out. If we were getting that from Breece Hall, and I think that's got to be in the range of outcomes, I think fantasy managers would be happy taking him in round 5, dealing with some bad weeks, and then having him on the team to be a league winner in the second half of the season.
It's not just that he's not coming off an ACL. He also doesn't have the Cowboys offensive line.
Okay, and that's another issue. Did you watch Hard Knocks?
Guys, come on. We got to get moving here to our busts here. Go ahead.
Don't guys me.
Well, Guy, yes, we don't need to talk about Hard Knocks right now. Aaron Rodgers also hurt his calf, so that's something to keep in mind as well. Probably not a big deal. Javonte Williams is expected to play on Saturday. Anthony Richardson has been named the starting quarterback for the Colts. Speaking of busts, I think we should have a little Alexander Mattison conversation here because it seems like there are still some veteran running backs out there. There's Fournette, there's Kareem Hunt, obviously. And it seems like Minnesota could be a destination. It just, they are, looks like in the mix. So when that happens, is that going to be a big deal for Alexander Mattison? I've been getting fairly excited about him. What do you guys think? Are we worried about bust potential for Mattison?
Yes, because we've seen running backs of that profile, career backups who get thrust into a role and flame out. In fact, one of the guys who is the most obvious example of that was actually visiting Minnesota yesterday, Mike Davis. I think maybe the Vikings heard us comparing Alexander Mattison to Mike Davis and said, yeah, we should bring him in. I don't really think, we're not sure how much Dalvin Cook has left. I'm less sure how much Kareem Hunt or Leonard Fournette has left. And so, yes, it would be a little bit of a concern. Yes, there is a little bit of bust risk for Alexander Mattison, but I would much rather draft him than Breece Hall.
I would too.
Okay.
I think he's got a shot at double-digit touchdowns if he's the guy for the majority of the year for Minnesota.
Okay. Kansas City wide receiver Justin Ross was carted off with a leg injury, not expected to be serious. Carolina wide receiver Terrace Marshall tweaked his back. Micah Parsons hurt his leg, but he says he's not worried about it. He says he's not worried about it. What I've learned is that when it comes to sources about injuries, the least reliable people are in this order: Pete Carroll and the player who got injured. You should not listen to them when it comes to injuries. Greg Rosenthal of NFL Network says that Malik Willis is likely to win the backup job behind Ryan Tannehill. So that would mean he would be beating out Will Levis. I think they both struggled in that preseason.
There have been reports that Willis has been better in camp.
He did look a lot better than Levis, and better than himself last year for sure. But he struggled. Seattle linebacker Jordan Brooks is off the PUP list. He tore his ACL in January. He was an IDP stud.
Wow.
So good to have him back. If he's not guaranteed to be back for week 1 though. All right, let's get into our busts. So quarterback bust. I got Heath. Let's go Heath's list first here. You've got Joe Burrow at quarterback. He's going 37th overall in ADP. Is he what, a QB5? Just after Lamar Jackson, or basically tied with Lamar Jackson? Your thoughts on Burrow?
Yeah, I think there's actually a difference when it comes to half PPR versus full PPR. Which one of those guys is 4 or 5? And that doesn't make any sense at all. But I can't take him, especially in leagues. And again, all these Fantasy Pros ADPs are 4 points per pass touchdown leagues. I can't take him ahead of Lamar Jackson or Justin Fields in a league that only rewards 4 points per pass touchdown, especially when he's not even 100% yet and not guaranteed to play week 1. I do think that Burrow is, for me right now, he's QB7 just behind Justin Herbert. If he was 100% right now, he would be QB6 and right behind Fields and Lamar. But that's in 6 point per pass touchdown leagues. There's a bigger gap here. More importantly, I don't really think Lamar or Burrow or Fields should be going at that 3-4 turn. I like Mahomes, Allen, and Hurts at the end of round 2, and then I think there should be a 2-round gap before we get to the next quarterback. I'd be looking at the end of round 4 before I took my QB4, whoever it was.
All right, so you're saying even in a 6 point per passing touchdown league, Joe Burrow would be QB6 if he were 100% healthy right now?
Yes.
Okay. Dave, do you agree with this bus call?
Yeah, it's too soon to take any of these quarterbacks, and I agree that Burrow, Fields, and Jackson, which is how I have them ranked, should be late round 4 picks. Not even round 5. Late round 4 is where to go with them. I'm projecting Burrow like he's going to be okay. The fact that he's already starting to throw, again, he's got a month to get ready. I think he'll be okay.
Yeah.
So I am projecting a little bit that Joe Burrow will get in plenty of practice before week 1, and he will be his usual fireballing self. Oh, and I also agree that he should be behind these guys in 4 point per passing touchdown leagues.
Do you agree that he should be behind Fields and Jackson?
No,
6?
no,
Okay.
he should be ahead of them.
Running back, Heath's running back busts. Nick Chubb. Let's just stop. I'll give you the list. Chubb at 13th overall, RB5. Najee Harris, 29th. Breece Hall, 33rd. Ken Walker, 46th. We talked about both of them. Alvin Kamara, 57th. Dalvin Cook, 65th. I'm not sure I believe that ADP anymore. I'd like to know what it is. Actually, maybe I do, because a lot of people actually prefer him to Breece Hall. But this ADP is from way before the signing with the Jets. So anyways, Cook at 65, Pacheco at 70. I'll say all the names again, but we'd have to spend some time on Nick Chubb. Calling him a bust at 13th overall. Maybe this is not a guy that has to be a full round worse than his ADP. You tell me, where should Nick Chubb go in full PPR?
I think I have him exactly a full round. I think I have him at 25th. So he's going at the 1-2 turn. I have him at the 2-3 turn. I just think expecting him to finish RB5 in full PPR is basically expecting Nick Chubb in his age 28 season to have a career year. And I'm not willing to project that. He gets hidden a little bit in the guys that we worry about falling off, because he's going to begin the year as age 27. He doesn't turn 28 until later in the year. But I do think he's really never been a pass catcher. He had 36 catches as a career high, and that was in a full 16-game season. I don't think he's going to help you that much in that regard. He's kind of been up and down in terms of touchdowns. He's missed some games because of injury already. Listen, he's one of the greatest runners in the NFL of the last 5 years. I'm not trying to disparage Nick Chubb as a runner, but if the Browns are going to throw the ball a lot more because they have Deshaun Watson, and Deshaun Watson's probably going to run more based on what we saw in the preseason than any quarterback Nick Chubb's played with, I'm not sure there's a huge increase in volume coming, even with Kareem Hunt gone. I don't want to bet on a running back at 28 years old having a career year.
Heath and I got to the same place, different ways. I think Chubb is going to see potentially the type of target share that he had in 2019, which was 3.1 targets per game, 2.3 catches per game. He finishes RB11 that year at 15.1 PPR points per game. I am expecting Chubb to share some of that passing downs work with Jerome Ford. I think that team likes Jerome Ford. They did not, he wasn't 100%, so they didn't play him in the preseason game against Washington. But I think you're going to see Ford out there. I was impressed with Deshaun Watson and how comfortable he seemed in the offense. His stats weren't great. He looked good. He admitted after the game that last year he was not comfortable. This year he is. And I have the same feeling that Heath does, that this Browns team is going to throw more than they ever have under Kevin Stefanski. They've been below 55% pass rate each of 3 years with Stefanski. I think they open it up. And Chubb just had a career year. 1,764 total yards, 13 touchdowns. It helped that he played 17
When would
games.
you take him, Dave?
I'm closer to ADP than Heath is. I would still say he's fine at like anywhere between, 16th or later. Let's just say that.
What about in half PPR?
A little bit higher than that. And in non-PPR, he's a first-round pick.
Agreed in non-PPR for sure. If I was using and I don't know where he is in half PPR. If I was using half PPR ADP, I don't think I would have been a full round behind him. I think he's 10th maybe in half PPR, and I'd probably be closer to 16th in half PPR. But I just don't think. I think there's a little bit more risk than people are acknowledging, and I don't think he's going to have a huge role in the passing game. But that's again part of my projections process. I have a hard time when a guy's established in the league for 5 years, projecting them to do something they've never really done.
Deshaun has a 15.8% career running back target rate. 1 year of his career, he threw over 20% of his targets to a running back, and it was last season in Cleveland.
For reference, 15.8% is extremely low.
Yes. Thank you for saying that. Where do you have him in non-PPR, Heath? I've got Nick Chubb at 7th overall.
That sounds about right.
Okay. There was one time before Kareem Hunt was there, first 8 games of 2019, Chubb was on pace for 53 catches. That
was the 2019 season.
Right, but you got to split that up because half the season he had Kareem Hunt, half the season he didn't. Hunt was suspended for the first 8 games. There was a huge drop in his catches once Hunt came aboard. Najee Harris at 29. I know you do not like that at all. When would you take Najee Harris, Heath?
He's a round 4 pick for me. I've got him at RB 17 in full PPR. Just moved Jahmyr Gibbs ahead of him. I've been a little bit low on Gibbs as well. But yeah, I think that I can see why people are excited about him because the offensive line should be better, and he has seen a ton of work. I've said this 100 times over the summer, so I don't know if I need to say it again. But there hasn't been a running back who has received 600 touches in their first 2 seasons and been as bad as both a rusher and a receiver as Najee Harris, who's ever had more than one top 20 season again for the rest of their career.
Oh, it's an amazing stat. All right. So Dave, where would you take Najee Harris as you've been?
I have Harris as a late round 3 pick in full PPR.
All right. Alvin Kamara at 57 overall. What do you think? That's too early, Heath?
That's why I put him on the bust list. I've got him at the I've got him at the end of round 6. I know you were encouraged by how he looked, and he did. Like I think that's part of the equation is he's been so much less efficient his past 2 seasons, both in terms of all 3 yards per carry, yards per target, yards per touch, have not been the same guy. And now he's got Jamal Williams and Taysom Hill both to deal with in the red zone. And maybe they're going to throw it a whole lot more, but I'm not convinced of that. And even if they do, I think it's probably because they have Michael Thomas healthy. And if both Chris Olave and Michael Thomas are healthy and on the field, I don't think Kamara's target share is going to be what it was in the heyday of Drew Brees because Derek Carr will be able to throw the ball more than 5 yards down the field. And so I think there's a lot of risk for a running back his age who's already shown signs of decline and isn't going to play the first 3 weeks of the season. And I'm not sure the same upside exists.
Yeah, I know we like James Conner better than him. He's going after Alvin Kamara. Do we like Cam Akers and Rashad White better than Alvin Kamara?
White, yes. Akers, no, in full PPR.
I agree with that, but I have Kamara and Akers 70 and 71. So like, it's not, okay. I'm not far off.
Do we
like Kamara or Breece Hall?
Kamara.
Me too.
Do we like DeAndre Swift better than Kamara?
No.
All right. Why is Isaiah Pacheco on your bust list?
Well, another guy who is not healthy, and even when he was healthy last year, was not really very good for fantasy purposes. He's like the definition of a trap back. He's not going to catch hardly any passes. He we know what the Chiefs do in the red zone. It all kinds of crazy stuff, except for hand it off to a running back and have him plunge into the line of scrimmage. So I don't think you can project him for a good touchdown season. And he's a guy who was a 7th round pick and could be replaced at literally any moment. And I don't think he's even been on the practice field so far this preseason.
Okay. So would you take Samaje Perine over him?
By a lot.
David Montgomery, I know you like him. These guys are going after him. How about A.J. Dillon or Perine? Or no, sorry, or Pacheco?
It's Dillon for me because I think they profile for the same number of touches. Dillon might actually have a goal line role, though.
All right. We got to take a break here. We have a lot more names. We haven't even got to Dave's busts yet. Wide receivers, tight ends, and then all of Dave's busts after this on Fantasy Football Today. Let's take a look at Heath's wide receiver busts other than DK Metcalf, who we discussed. There's only one other name here. It's Amari Cooper. He's going 41st overall. He is 29 years old. He was wide receiver 19 per game last season. And that is, let's see, Cooper is wide receiver for 18 this season. So why is this too early for Amari Cooper?
I just think he's being drafted pretty close to his ceiling. And there's a risk that, there's been people that have said that Elijah Moore is the wide receiver 1 on this team. I don't have it projected that way, and I don't think that that's what it's going to be, but I do think it's a possibility. I don't think that the 25%, definitely 20%, but up to 26, 27% tight end target share is going to change all that much in Kevin Stefanski's system. You know how I feel about tight end buckets. And so I think Cooper is chopping up those wide receiver targets with better target competition. And you can only start him for like 8 or 9 games because you can't start him when he's on the road.
All right. So
And I think everybody, like all of us, Dave and Jamie like him more. Sportsline likes him more, but we all have him ranked lower than where he's being drafted.
Yeah, a little bit. But who has more upside that's going behind him, behind Cooper?
Well, I don't have the list. Why don't you give me a list of the wide receivers who are being drafted?
All right.
Behind
Well,
him.
some of them are obvious. Keenan Allen.
Yep.
Terry McLaurin. Like I don't think so personally.
Nope.
But
Me neither.
I think they're pretty similar.
Hopkins. Have to say yes.
Way more.
DJ Moore.
I would say yes.
Jerry Jeudy.
More.
I don't even like Jerry Jeudy. I'm behind Amari Cooper, and I would say he still has more upside, just a much lower floor.
Yeah, that's the thing. Does Cooper have a high floor? It's not all about upside.
8 to 9 weeks, he does.
All right, let's talk about your tight end busts, and they are Kittle and Waller. No, we won't talk about them. We're not talking about any of your tight end busts. We've already talked about Kittle and Waller. And finally, it is time for Dave Richards' busts. Quarterback, Lamar. I love this. Let's talk about this. I lose sleep at night with this one. Lamar Jackson.
Me too. Oh.
Lamar Jackson as QB 4 or 5. He's
right
close there. Your thoughts?
So all the early QBs have a ADP that's too high, but the one that worries me the most is Lamar Jackson's, where he's in that late round 3, early round 4 range. You can tell me what his ADP is, Adam?
33rd?
That's round 3. I can't do it. I know that he's got glorious upside given all the changes, but I think it's just too risky to prioritize him versus Burrow, who was very good last year, and Fields, who when he was running from week 5 through week 17, I guess it was, I think it pales in comparison. Might he throw more and run less? Is that what the Ravens are going to ask him to do? Well, anywhere from 30 to 35% of his fantasy production has come from rushing over the course of his career. So if he's running less, he'll be asked to make up for it with his passing. And over the past 2 seasons, in the red zone, his completion rate is 50.5%. That's below league average. He's missed 10 games, and he's only run for 5 touchdowns over those last 2 seasons. I'm a little bit nervous that he can make up the gap if he's truly running less. It sounds like the offense is going to be spread formation, get the ball out quick, hope that your receivers can make plays after the catch. He does have receivers who can do that when they're healthy. Hopefully they all stay healthy. That would help Lamar Jackson put up some career highs in passing. And that would probably help him finish as a top 4 or 5 fantasy quarterback. I'm not taking any of that second tier of quarterbacks in late round 3. And Jackson's the one that I think has the most risk compared to Burrow and Justin Fields.
So first off, a point of agreement. I'm not taking any of those quarterbacks in round 3 or either. I already said that, but I think the context that all of these leagues that we're looking at for this ADP are 4 points per pass touchdown means that Lamar should be no worse than QB5. And there's a much better case for him at QB4 than there is for Joe Burrow. The other thing I would say is if Lamar Jackson has a career year as a passer, he will be QB1. Like he threw 36 touchdown passes and 3,100 yards in 2019. If he tops those two numbers, he's going to be QB1. The only real risk.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, what will it take for him to have a career year as a passer?
I think a good start would be an offensive coordinator who understands the passing game, which he now has, and
hopefully, yes,
the best wide receiver core of his career, which I think he now has.
So I don't know if you can count on to be there for 12 games, much less 17.
Yeah. Well, one of the balances though, Heath, is if people are projecting a big bump in his pass attempts, is that going to come at the expense of his rush attempts? You know, it's almost like people are like, well, he's going to rush for all the, he's more like an 1,100, 1,200 yard rusher per 17 games. Is that going to be 800 this year? Is it going to be 1,000? What do you have Lamar Jackson projected for?
I think I have him projected for 900. I would not expect him and again, I don't know. The key is going to be, and what Dave said will probably impact it. Like if all the wide receivers get hurt, then I would guess he's probably going to rush for 1,100 yards if Lamar Jackson's the one who stays healthy, because nobody's going to be open. They're going to design a lot more pass plays. But does Lamar get the ball to the guy, or does he just take off and run? Either of those are fine for fantasy purposes. I've got him at 877 rushing yards.
Okay. So CBS ADP, CBS leagues default to 6 point per passing touchdown leagues. Doesn't mean you can't change that. But CBS ADP has Lamar Jackson as QB5. Quarterbacks are flying off the board. Mahomes 5th, Hurts 11th, Allen 12th, Burrow 23rd, Jackson 25th, Justin Herbert 29th. And then based on that, incredible value on Justin Fields, 45th overall, 20 picks after Lamar Jackson. But he's in between Burrow and Herbert here and way ahead of Justin Fields. Look, if you want to look at the best case scenario for Joe Burrow is what he did last year when he had a healthy Chase and Higgins.
Mm-hmm.
And that was 4,945 yards. This is the pace. 4,945 yards, 42 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, plus 223 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. I still think that best case scenario is better than anyone but the top 3.
Well, that best case scenario is only about 90% of Lamar Jackson's career high.
I don't think Lamar Jackson's best case scenario is his career.
And I think that's the way that that's a very frustrating thing to argue against, when one quarterback can reach his career best, but another quarterback cannot. Like if you were saying that somebody's ceiling is what they've already done, but the other guys is not, I don't know how to argue.
Burrow's never actually done that. Even that's a point for
right. That's
of course
on it. But yeah, because I could see Burrow having a 5,000 yard season with 42 touchdowns. I mean, that's what guys, if he's
going, you're just talking about something that exists in your head. Like, yeah, I could see that.
Well,
like what relevance does that have?
Right. How likely is that to happen?
That's what we do in fantasy. I don't think 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns is unrealistic for a guy if he throws 38 times a game with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. I don't think that's really out of the question. Jackson has been so up and down in his career.
Yeah.
And I don't think Mahomes can do what he did in his best season. I think Jackson had a huge outlier season.
And that's the other thing is like Mahomes has been within 1 fantasy point of that twice in the last 4 years.
And so Lamar has been like 7 points away from his 7 points or more
he hasn't
per
even
game.
Been close. And if you remove the injured games, as I do with Lamar Jackson,
right,
he still hasn't even been close.
Well, I think if you just look at the games where Lamar Jackson had Rashad Bateman and Mark Andrews last year, he was better than Joe Burrow was with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase.
He started off the season red hot.
He had 4 straight games with fewer than 20 fantasy points. He had 2 massive games. And
we're not talking about the games when guys didn't have their weapons.
Rashad
we're gonna
Bateman was doing almost nothing. This whole
Even I have to push
he
back
was
on that.
doing almost nothing. He was getting hardly any targets. He was a big play guy every now and then. That was a coincidence. This whole thing about Rashad Bateman, I don't buy it at all. That was
I don't think you are an unbiased observer of Lamar Jackson at this point.
I don't think you're an unbiased observer of Lamar Jackson. Every year you tell me how great Lamar Jackson's going to be. He's an extremely inconsistent player, and you refuse to accept it. So I'm not going to let you criticize my take. You are on one side of Lamar Jackson. I have been on the other. I accept that, but we're both biased, I would say. But I just don't think Lamar Jackson. I don't think any quarterback we should expect the upside of the season he had. I just don't think that is going to happen. You just can't imagine.
Rashad Bateman was on pace for 1,281 yards and 11 touchdowns the first 3 weeks of last year.
I mean, look at his game log. He was like, it's just, you can't expect.
I don't, when you give me your feeling and I give you the facts, I don't know how to respond to that any other way.
I'm giving you the facts. 59 yards, 108 yards, 59 yards, 17 yards. He averaged 5 targets per game, basically. Then he had 42 yards in week 7, and then he got hurt. So what is he? At best, a 60-yard guy at a 108-yard game. That's great. He had a
DK Metcalf's been a 60-yard guy 3 of the last 4 years.
There's nothing to do with DK Metcalf. Nothing to do with it.
Yeah, you're poo-pooing Rashad Bateman's impact because he averaged. Yeah.
No,
that's how it is. And the Ravens might have 3 of them.
You think I have something against Lamar Jackson? What I have,
I think you're not drafting Lamar Jackson in round 3. Here's the question for you, Adam. It's 47th overall. You need a quarterback. Lamar Jackson's on the board. So is Justin Herbert. So is Trevor Lawrence. Are you taking a quarterback? Question 1 and question 2. Which one?
No, and Lamar Jackson. Wait, what pick is it?
47.
Yeah, I'll take Lamar Jackson at 47.
Okay.
Absolutely.
That's the argument. His ADP is too
on Jackson because I was penalizing him for the new offensive coordinator because I thought it's going to be hard for him to adjust. It's a completely different system. They tailor-made a system for him. But I think I'm being unfair because I like the new coordinator for Justin Herbert. I like it for even Russell Wilson at a lower level. I should be open-minded. I should be more interested in Lamar Jackson.
I did hear some rumblings that Lamar struggled initially with the offense.
Yeah, that's not a surprise.
Okay. I agree with you. I love Monken, but I did hear that early on that he was struggling a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to be the low guy on Lamar Jackson, but I feel like I've been right the last couple of years because people can't stand the boomer bust nature of him. And I hope he's a little more consistent. All right. Anyway,
I hope he's not. I enjoy the boomer bust nature. Is that last thing that I'll say. And that's probably the biggest difference is I think that the boomer bust players win you weeks.
Kirk Cousins, Daniel Jones, and Aaron Rodgers. They're all going 104th to 110th. Why are they busts for you, Dave?
They're just going. It's the same argument as Lamar Jackson. I don't have a real big problem with Cousins. He's steady at around 20 fantasy points per game. He averaged 20.6 fantasy points per game last year. Feels like he averages that much every year. And then even when TJ Hawkinson came in, he was at 20.6. The argument that you can make for Cousins is that now he's got Jordan Addison instead of Adam Thielen. And that might boost his yardage because Addison is a much better, or figures to be a much better after catch receiver than Adam Thielen was in 2022. So I like him. I'm just not drafting him in round 9. Daniel Jones worries me because we're buying in him as a rusher. Last year was the first year that he had all these rushing yards. What if he only has 500? What if the Giants throw more? What if they hand off to Saquon more? I think there's some variables that we're kind of overlooking when it comes to Daniel Jones. Maybe he doesn't scramble as much as he did last year. And I would take that into some consideration with him. I do think he can be better as a passer than he was last year. I don't have a problem with taking him. Where is he among the quarterbacks? Like what QB is he off the board? Adam?
Who's that? Daniel Jones?
Daniel Jones?
Daniel, probably about 15, 16.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. It's the location. I don't like taking him in round 9.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm a little bothered by something. Who do you guys think has more upside, Justin Fields or Justin Herbert?
Fields.
Yeah. I think you know where I'm going to go with that. I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yep.
It's not fair to pick apart everything I say. Like I can't have an opinion.
No,
I mean, Justin Herbert's best year was 4 points better than Justin Fields' best year. And I agree, Justin Fields has more upside than Justin Herbert.
What was Justin Fields when he got into the groove last year? And that's the offense that I expect to improve upon.
No, I agree. I'm not even arguing this. My point is you're allowed to base projections.
Of course. Listen, man, and that comes back to one of the core tenets of fantasy drafting. Draft guys you love, draft guys you believe in. That's really it's one of the most simple things you could do. So if you hear us talk about Lamar Jackson, you go, you know what? Heath's right. He's awesome. I would take him. And you want to reach for Lamar Jackson? Man, just do it. It's your team. Have fun with it. This is supposed to be fun. Fantasy's not supposed to be a chore. It's not supposed to make you feel terrible. It's supposed to be fun. Take the players that you want and be happy.
Jonathan Taylor is not someone you're taking 18th overall, Dave.
He scares the crap out of me. I want him to get traded. If he doesn't get traded, I don't want him even in round, maybe the last pick of round 2.
Okay, so 2-3 turn, you're looking for Taylor?
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 drafts. I was in a draft Monday where he went with the 3rd pick of round 3, and then last night I think he went with the 3rd to last pick of round 2. So that's about a 6 picks.
Too soon.
Yeah.
Now look, if he gets traded to Miami or Kansas City, apparently a lot of teams are interested in him, but they don't want to pay what Indianapolis wants, and they don't want to pay him a crazy deal. But if he gets traded, then he might be 5th overall. So if you're drafting him, maybe that should be 10% of what you think about. What if he gets traded? But the Colts have no motivation to trade him unless somebody comes up with a good offer.
All right, Antonio Gibson. He's RB 35. Well, so I was a little confused by his ADP. I didn't see him at 88th. I saw him at 99th. I thought you had him at 88th, but
I saw him at 88th.
Where would you take Gibson?
He's after 100th overall. Last year, when in games with Brian Robinson, he was getting 10 PPR points per game. I think that's just what he is. And when we're talking before or after 100th overall, I think I can find enough players that can hopefully give me a little bit more upside than Gibson, who seems to be passing downs back in an offense with a suspect offensive line. I still think it's a suspect quarterback situation and 2 really good receivers that will probably see significantly more targets, obviously, than AG.
Heath, you like Gibson top 100, right?
Yeah. I think a high-end number 2 running back. I prefer him to DeAndre Swift. I think they probably have a pretty similar role.
Did you say number 2?
Number 2?
High-end number 2 running back?
No, number 3. If I said number 2, that was wrong. But
okay.
I think he's right in that DeAndre Swift. I think he's right in that DeAndre Swift range, except he's on a team that's going to throw it significantly more and probably throw it to their running backs a lot more than the Philadelphia Eagles are. And I think there's an underrated chance that Gibson is actually a better rusher this year than Brian Robinson. So, yeah, I'm not going out and making it intentional about drafting Antonio Gibson, but I'm fine when he falls to me.
All right, let's go to wide receiver. Dave's wide receiver busts are DK Metcalf, who we talked about earlier, Terry McLaurin at 47th overall, and then Treylon Burks at 93 overall. Go ahead on McLaurin and Burks.
I just think it's too soon on McLaurin. I love the talent. I love the guy. He's a great guy, but he's never been an amazing producer for fantasy other than, a handful of games each year. Last year, 13.5 PPR points per game. That was a career high. Just talked about the concerns I have with the offense in general and the quarterbacks also. And Jahan Dotson's there. And Dotson he was like a playmaker for touchdowns last year, more so than McLaurin was. There's a part of me that thinks that Dotson could overtake McLaurin as the number 1 guy as far as production in this Washington offense.
He went ahead of McLaurin last night, Heath.
Yeah, and I've got Dotson ahead of McLaurin. I like Dotson a lot. I think I have a lot more faith in Eric Bieniemy than everybody else seems to, which probably makes sense. And I don't really see, I know there was the 2020 season, but I just don't really see that big of difference between Terry McLaurin and DK Metcalf, other than DK Metcalf just had JSN added to his team. I think McLaurin's been better at least 2 out of the 4 seasons they've been in the NFL, and including last year. And they're pretty similar guys on teams that I think throw at a pretty similar rate. Metcalf has a better quarterback, but also more competition for targets than McLaurin has.
They're back to back in my receiver rankings. And I was taking Metcalf outside of round 4.
All right, let's talk about Treylon Burks here. Is he just not a top 100 pick?
Yeah, it's the ADP argument. Another player. I love the talent, don't love the situation. I feel like Hopkins has to get hurt in order for Treylon Burks to really pop off this year. Great reports out of Nashville on how he's looking in camp, and he's got the asthma under control, and he's in much better shape. I'm just worried about how much they'll throw and how many of those throws will go his way.
Yeah, if you don't like Hopkins, if you're someone who doesn't like Hopkins, I'm not talking to Dave specifically.
You're not.
Then you should probably look at Treylon Burks. I mean, if you think like, oh, Hopkins going to get hurt, Burks could be a steal if Hopkins gets hurt, right? He has been hurt 2 years in a row, and
he could deliver value at this cost, even if Hopkins doesn't get hurt.
Where do you have him, Heath?
Wide receiver 40 around round 8.
Okay. Yeah, I'm at the end of round 9 on Burks.
Tight end, Kittle and Waller, but also Goddard. And
all in the same range.
Well, it's just too early for you to take a tight end. Is that it?
It's definitely that. In the case of Goddard, I think he's safe if you're looking for 11 PPR points per game. I just don't know if he's got the upside to get much more than that.
I wonder, like with Goddard specifically, like he was at 11.6 last year with 3 touchdowns, and he had at least one. No, I guess he had the injury, but he played the full game, so he didn't have that partial game. But like if he just does what he did last year on a per game basis and scores touchdowns at a rate that he has for most of his career, he's a top 3 tight end, right?
I think he might be a top 3 tight end if Brown or Smith miss any time. That's the upside.
Of course. But the year before he was at 10.6 PPR points per game. Last year was better. 11. You said 11.6. I have him at 11.8. Whatever the difference is.
Like his 17,
fine.
His 17 game pace was for 994 receiving yards. If they throw more and he scores, that's an elite season.
That's the thing. He doesn't score. And why is that? I don't know. It could be fluky, but one thing, he doesn't run a lot of routes. Well, he doesn't run a lot of Dallas Goedert does not run a lot of routes inside the 10-yard line. That is not
blocking.
A big part of
they run a lot.
Yes. So he's ranked low there. He doesn't get a lot of end zone targets. The end zone targets thing, though, I feel like is fluky and could change. But that's just been a weird thing. He's been basically the most efficient tight end. He's like George Kittle, as Heath said. What doesn't get touchdowns?
What does I will say his touchdown rate before last year was 5.9%, and it was closer to 4% last year. So he hasn't had a big touchdown season. That's true. But he's scored on a per target basis at a higher rate in the past than he did last year.
That's true. But what does he have in common with Miamisburg, Ohio?
I don't know.
45343. That's the zip code for Miamisburg, Ohio. Those are the number of touchdowns that Dallas Goedert's had each of his past 5 seasons.
We learn something new every day. All right, we have to get going here, Dave. Give me a quick thought on David Njoku, 98th overall. You have him as a bust.
So his zip code starts with 33. No, I just think he's being drafted too high with Elijah Moore there and other peripheral receivers. I wonder if Njoku's targets take a hit with Deshaun Watson. I think it's a different situation from last year. Brissett definitely has a tendency to look at his tight end more. That was one of the reasons why I liked Njoku as a sleeper last year. He came through on that, and he had a couple of good games with Deshaun Watson, but I think that the target volume is going to be a little tougher for Njoku to come by. Last year, 10.1 PPR points per game. I'm expecting that average to be lower this year.
All right, that's it for fantasy football today. We've got our breakouts tonight, beginning at 7 o'clock Eastern. Just subscribe to the channel, youtube.com/fantasyfootballtoday, and you'll see when they're publishing or when they're recording. They're going to be publishing throughout the day on Thursday. So we will talk to you then. Have a good one, everybody.